Well, now to what is being hailed as the most significant Supreme Court decision on abortion in the last 2 decades, and it went in favor of abortion rights advocates. They cheered and hugged outside the Supreme Court at word of this decision. In a 5-3 ruling, the Supreme Court struck down a Texas law known as HB 2 that put restrictions on abortion clinics. One required Texas clinics to upgrade facilities to hospital-like standards, and the other required abortion doctors to have hospital admitting privileges. The majority of justices found that the requirements put a, quote, substantial obstacle to women seeking abortions and constitutes an undue burden on their constitutional right to do so. Joining me now, the author of The Oath, the Obama White House, and the Supreme Court, CNN senior legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin. Also here with us, Rachel Stockman, managing editor of lawnews.com and a senior editor at Mediaite. Thank you both for coming on. Jeffrey, I want to start with you because once again it came down to Justice Anthony Kennedy as the swing vote here. What is the significance of that?
Well, Justice Kennedy has been running this court for a long time. He is the swing vote here. He was the swing vote last week in the affirmative action case. And in both cases, he sided with the liberals. He allowed affirmative action to continue at the University of Texas. And here he ruled that these restrictions on doctors and on clinics in Texas violated women's right to choose abortion, represented an undue burden on that right. And not only will the Texas rules fall, but almost certainly very similar laws in Mississippi and Louisiana and perhaps other states will now be struck down as well.
And that is a big question, what will happen to those laws. But Rachel, in your view, what does this mean, the fact that Justice Kennedy has the liberal justices on this, on affirmative action, as Jeffrey said, on gay marriage? Is this a sign he's moving more toward the left?
Well, I think it's interesting what Jeffrey Toobin pointed out, but I think there's something that's a little different about this particular opinion that came out today on abortion rights. And I don't know if Jeffrey would agree with me, but the way it was written, even though it was written by Justice Breyer, was very much in the fashion of how a Justice Kennedy swing-like opinion would have been written. He signed on to it. He didn't write it. It was very technical. It talked about medical evidence. It laid out the argument against Texas. So I do think that while this is interesting that Kennedy did come out on the side of the, quote, liberal justices, I don't necessarily think that it sets any kind of precedent, so to speak, that he's now going over to the liberal side. Jeffrey, I don't know if you'd agree with me on that.
But it's also interesting, though, and I'll let you jump in, but that he didn't write the opinion when he has in all the major abortion cases. He was, since he's been on the bench, he was the senior justice, but he handed it to Breyer, Jeff.
That is somewhat surprising, although he was writing the affirmative action opinion at the same time, and they do try to spread the work around a little bit. You know, Justice Kennedy is a mercurial figure. You cannot pigeonhole him entirely. Yes, it's true that he is the father of gay rights on the Supreme Court. He is also the author of Citizens United, the case that deregulated American politics and is the decision perhaps more than any other liberals love to hate. So, you know, Justice Kennedy is not a permanent member of one wing or the other. This year, he certainly helped the liberals to 2 very important victories.
And I want to switch to another, but I want to have enough time to get to this other big court ruling today, Rachel, and get you to weigh in on it. The Supreme Court throwing out the federal corruption conviction of former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell. What does this ruling say about how politicians can act around private companies moving forward and private individuals?
Well, I think, to me, it was very surprising. It was 8-0, everyone in favor of this. And I think it was a rejection of this broad interpretation of what an official act means. Okay, so what does this all mean? I think that it will make it harder for federal prosecutors to charge and convict these types of cases, because while the Supreme Court wasn't very exact in what exactly constitutes an official act, clearly they've said something like making phone calls for a donor or setting up and making calls about a fundraiser doesn't count. So the question now is, what does count?
And it was so interesting that at the very end of the opinion written by Chief Justice Roberts, he says, there is no doubt that this case is distasteful. It may be worse than that, but was the behavior criminal? this could be retried. We will have to see what happens. Rachel Stockman, Jeffrey Toobin, thank you very much to both of you.